Knowledge for Men, episode 88.
Welcome to knowledgeformen.com, where you're going to grow into the man you want to be. Your life will never be the same again. I can guarantee it.
Hey guys, one of the questions I've been getting a lot lately is, can you put together a list of the best books and success quotes from all of your guests and combine that into one guide? And so I've actually just done that. It's called the top 30 books and success quotes every man must live by. So out of all of the podcast episodes I've done, over 60, I finally put together this guide, and you can download it for free at kfmfree.com. Again, that's kfmfree.com. All right, I'm here with Ben Greenfield, New York Times bestselling author, coach, speaker, ex-bodybuilder, and Ironman triathlete. In 2008, Ben was voted by the National Strength and Conditioning Association as America's top personal trainer. He holds a master's degree in exercise physiology and biomechanics from the University of Idaho and is also a certified sports nutritionist and strength and conditioning coach. Ben now works with athletes, CEOs, and soccer moms from around the world to achieve incredible feats of physical endurance without destroying their body. All right, Ben, happy to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. And you didn't mention that I've got twin boys, but that's like the hardest part about everything. I think that's my claim to fame is I've managed to get 2 6-year-old guys so far through 6 years without dying. So
that's the biggest achievement there. Maybe we focus on fatherhood and just cut out all the health stuff for this episode. Right?
There we go.
I'm sure you got a lot of stuff to say there.
Fatherhood and fertility, how to have all your kids in one shot.
All right, cool. So, Ben, we always start off every show with a favorite success quote, something that the guest has lived by. So, what do you got for us? And if you can explain why.
Oh, dude. Okay, so basically when I wake up every day, I've got some of the major tasks for the day that pop up on my computer screen along with a quote. And the quote that greets me every day to inspire me to just get out and learn and have fun and just like eat the world basically and kind of taste everything that there is to offer is this. A human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects.
Well, that's quite the quote there.
I know. It's not a short one.
That's got to give you like, man, I got so much stuff to do today.
No, but just like, it's a good reminder that like, it just seems like a lot of times these days people have kind of forgotten, or especially guys kind of forgotten that part of having fun with life is being a Renaissance man. Like you don't have to be good at one thing and crappy at a bunch of things. Like I think that you should have a couple of things that you are pretty good at and have a passion for whatever it is that you're doing for business, and maybe have a sport or a hobby that you happen to be really good at. But you should also just like get out there and, experience everything that the world has to offer. And that's a lot of times what drives me is just wanting to experience life, live.
I like that quote. I really do. And I think that gives us a good idea of who you are and kind of the direction we're going to take with this episode. But before we dive into some of the main content, let's learn more about who you are and how you got started with what you do. So take the mic.
Well, I grew up basically reading fantasy novels, writing, and computer programming and playing World of Warcraft and just like total nerd. I was president of the chess club and played the violin for 13 years and was just like, pretty off the deep end in terms of being a geek. I was homeschooled K through 12 and, just kind of grew up that way. And when I was 13 years old, I started playing tennis and started exercising and working out to get better at tennis. And really fell in love with finding every little hack, tip, and trick possible to make my body better and to get more fit, and kind of went from hoisting 10-pound dumbbells in my bedroom to, by the time I was a collegiate tennis player, really kind of straying away from the world of geekdom, kind of more into like kinesiology and biomechanics and human nutrition and supplementation. And I ended up kind of stopping tennis my second year of college and got into like bodybuilding and bro science, and all the different forms of creatine and the difference between whey protein isolate and casein whey blends and and everything you could do to basically, look good posing on stage in tiny versions of your mom's underwear, basically. And after that, just started to branch out and played water polo for the water polo team at University of Idaho, and played middle for the men's volleyball team, and then started to get into triathlon. And by the time I graduated, I was president of the triathlon club and had done a couple of Ironman triathlons, and kind of stuck with that for like almost a decade, just doing triathlons, it's a perfect place to geek out on sports, because you got to have like a combination of dialed in exercise physiology, but also an understanding of nutrition, because nutrition is kind of like the fourth discipline after swimming and biking and running and triathlon. It's like, if you don't figure out how to eat and drink the right way, you're pretty much screwed. It's really like a sport of attrition in that way.
So you're talking about during the race.
Yeah.
During the race, how you eat.
Yeah, it's kind of different from like, baseball or football or something like that in that respect, in that it's a sport where eating is kind of a big deal, and you got to like figure out how to do it and still go fast. And, now I'm into obstacle racing, getting into Spartan and racing at, in the elite field and in Spartan races, and kind of getting more into that. Is kind of like a new sporting experience. So, along the way, I've basically taken everything that I'm kind of learning in the trenches, from exercise and fitness supplementation to lifestyle strategy, stress control, sleep, all this stuff, and just kind of wrapping it up into the way that I coach my clients. I do a lot of private consulting with folks from all over the world via Skype and email and online consulting, to what I present in my books and my programs that I write for injuries and fitness and triathlon training and everything else, to my podcasts. And that's pretty much what I love to do. Is, I like the human machine and learning about it and how to make it better, how to optimize it. I like to teach and tell people about what I learn, and also try it out myself in the field. And that's kind of what I do now.
So it's beyond just exercising and diet. You're looking at how to optimize your entire body for peak performance.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, I don't want to like do shameless self-promotion, but like I wrote a book called Beyond Training, and that's what it is. It like, it talks about workouts and stuff, but it's everything that goes beyond training: sleep, stress management, lifestyle, biohacking, just like all the stuff that you can do for performance and recovery and fat loss and digestion and hormone balance and brain optimization, but kind of above and beyond just like, throwing an exercise session at your body every day.
Oh, and now I want to get into some technical stuff here, Ben. Let's start with sleep. What are some things that we can do to improve the quality of our sleep and going to sleep faster and not having to toss and turn and get better overall sleep? What can we do?
Oh, geez, like the sky's the limit. I mean, if you read magazines and books and listen to podcasts and read websites these days, there is a plethora of sleep hygiene information. And I'm sure that your listeners are probably familiar with a lot of it. Keep your room dark and don't stare at your iPad in bed before you go to sleep at night. And try using melatonin, stuff like that. I mean, like, yeah, it's like there are so many things that you can do for sleep. I would say that I like to talk about things that have been working for me lately that I don't see a lot of other people talking about. So I'll tell you about those. So one thing is infrared waves. Now, infrared light has been shown in studies in athletes to increase sleep time in the morning and quality of sleep by 15 to 20 minutes, which is actually a pretty decent chunk of time. So the way that you do it is you get an infrared light bulb and you shine it on your body for about 15 to 20 minutes before you go to bed at night. Now, the cool thing is that infrared light is not comprised of the blue-white light wave spectrum, which is the type of light that comes off of like computer screens and phones and stuff that can suppress melatonin release and keep you from getting into your deep sleep phases. But infrared light from an infrared light bulb or like an infrared light therapy device, there's like these little boxes that emit infrared light. It not only helps you to sleep longer, but it also increases the activity of fibroblasts in your skin, which improves the quality of collagen and has like this anti-aging effect. So it helps with skin quality as well. So it's kind of a cool thing to do before you go to bed. And it's not just help you sleep better, but help you look better. And it's as simple as grabbing like a $9 infrared light bulb off Amazon, plugging it in next to your bed at night and turning that on as the only light in your room that shines at you before you go to bed at night. And you don't have to like blast it like right in your eyes, but it's just like you kind of want it on your body a little bit.
Wow, that seems like such a cool little trick, $9 on Amazon, and just you can basically get this light bulb and plug it into your nightstand before you go to bed for 15, 20 minutes, and you're going to improve the quality of your sleep.
Yeah, you could do that. Like what I did was I got one of those little like tripods that you put like a camera light on. So I just have that in the closet, and the infrared light bulb is attached to it. I just pull that out before bed at night, set next to the bed, plug it in. When I'm like ready for bed, I roll over and unplug it, and that's it. So infrared light's pretty cool. Another one that works really well is you've got this inhibitory neurotransmitter in your brain called gamma aminobutyric acid. And you may have seen this abbreviated as GABA. You'll see it sold at like Walgreens and CVS and like health food stores and stuff as a sleep supplement, GABA. But the problem with GABA is if you take GABA and it actually works, that means you have issues because it's a very large molecule and it shouldn't be able to cross the blood-brain barrier. And if it can, that means you have what's called a leaky blood-brain barrier, which is generally caused by like overexposure to like electromagnetic fields from working on your computer, inflammation, too much alcohol drinking, stress, stuff like that. But you can, instead of taking GABA, you can cause your body to just release more. And there's an herb you can take called passion flower, and you can get this in like liquid form off of Amazon. And it shuts down anxiety and stress and rapid thoughts and stuff like that super quick. And so if you're the type of person who has a hard time falling asleep at night, or you wake up at like 4 a.m. with thoughts racing through your head and it's kind of a crappy situation because you want to sleep like 2 more hours, but now you're awake, passion flower works really well. You just like put a dropper full of it underneath your tongue for about 60 to 90 seconds and you hold it and you just release this inhibitory neurotransmitter and start to fall back asleep. So I like passion flower as well.
This is good stuff. I haven't heard of, infrared light or passion flower before. This is really good.
Yeah, there's like 30 things in my book that I talk about, but I'm trying to come up with some stuff that like your listeners aren't going to find in other places. Okay, so here's one more new one. Like I hesitate to give you another supplement just because I don't want to sound like the guy who takes like a million supplements, but this one actually is kind of cool because it causes like lucid dreaming and deep dreaming, and some of that stuff's kind of cool too. Because the cool thing about lucid dreaming is like if you will dream about what you expose yourself to before you go to bed at night. So whatever that may be, if you want to read about if you want to dream about a threesome, then you read you read Shades of Grey or whatever before you go to bed at night. Or if you want to dream about a unicorn, read a storybook from the library about unicorns. Sky's the limit. But anyways, one of the things that can cause you to delve into that lucid dreaming really rapidly when you fall asleep is cannabidiol, which is the non-psychoactive component of hemp that does not cause you to feel funky when you're awake, but can help out with deep sleep and lucid dreaming. And you can actually get cannabidiol extract anywhere in all 50 states. It's completely legal, and you can order it as a liquid extract. You can get it like off of Amazon and other websites. And you look, same thing as the passion flower. You can put a dropper full in your mouth before you go to bed at night and hold it for about 60 to 90 seconds. And it's basically almost the equivalent of getting high while you're dreaming. But at the same time, it also increases deep sleep quality. It has some other cool anti-inflammatory effects and stuff like that too. But a lot of people think California and Colorado and Washington are the only places where you can get any of the beneficial health effects of pot. And the fact is you can buy cannabidiol extract anywhere. And it actually does have some pretty cool sleep enhancing and lucid dreaming producing qualities.
Okay, so does this affect you when you wake up? Are you feeling a little drowsy or woozy?
No, not at all. I don't like the stuff like benzodiazepines and Benadryl, like any of these chemical bricks that help you to fall asleep because they screw you up when you wake up. Like I want to hop out of bed ready to rumble, and ready to think and act.
Yeah, I mean, you got that quote to read. You got to take a while to read that.
It takes me 10 minutes to sit down and read a freaking quote. So yeah, I mean, no, it does not cause any of that morning drowsiness. And same thing with, I'll toss a bonus at you, one more, some melatonin, which I mentioned. Like if you take melatonin capsules and oral melatonin, it's very poorly absorbed and very little of it ever actually winds up in your brain if you're taking like a melatonin pill. And that stuff is helpful if you're traveling and going across multiple time zones and you want to regulate your circadian rhythms. But the way that you do it is you buy a patch. And same thing, you can get these at health food stores or Walgreens, or you can get them off Amazon, but they're these little patches, just like nicotine patches or testosterone patches, and you just put them like under your arm or on your inner thigh, and it gives you this slow bleed of melatonin while you're asleep. And as you age, you naturally produce less melatonin. So a lot of my older clients who have trouble sleeping, I'll just have them use these as a daily or nightly habit. But for most younger individuals, people under about 60 years old, they can just use these when they travel. And having some melatonin patches handy in your travel bag are actually it's a really good way to enhance sleep, again, without producing a lot of drowsiness when you get up in the morning.
Yeah, I'm looking on Amazon as you're talking right now, and these little tools that you're talking about aren't all that expensive. This melatonin patch is $17.99, and it comes with a good amount of patches here. And when we talk about sleep, especially if you're traveling or you need to get sleep, and it's a good quality sleep, and you're not going to feel drowsy or kind of like confused when you wake up with some of these other pills and sleeping aids. It's so important to get good sleep. I mean, especially if you're traveling, you're on vacation, you just spent thousands of dollars to go experience a new city or country, and if you can't enjoy it, if you can't get good sleep, you're going to be kind of tired, you're going to be kind of lost, you're going to be drinking a lot of coffee. Just get good sleep. So these are some really good tools that can really improve the quality of your sleep.
Yeah. Like the other thing is you lose your memories. Part of enjoying life is having memories. Like that's a big, big part of travel and experiencing things is the memories that stay in your head afterwards. That's part of producing happiness in life. And you form memories when you're asleep. That's the only time when you actually cement memories and they're able to actually develop neurally. And so if you're not sleeping adequately, and especially if you're not reaching a deep sleep phase, then you have less memories than a person who's sleeping properly. So it's pretty important for happiness too.
Well, I think a lot of people are using Instagram for that, finding happiness thing. So, I don't think they need your sleeping tool. All right. And so you gave us some really good tips on sleeping. And I know there's something, you have an area that you really focus on a lot too with health is the gut. And this is something I don't think a lot of people talk about. How often do you talk about gut health? And I'd like you to shed some light on this and help us, explain to us why this is important and what we can do to improve our gut health.
Well, the gut is where you produce neurotransmitters. Like a lot of people know, like, most people aren't dumb. They know the gut is real. Like if you have a broken gut, you're going to have crappy digestion and you might get constipated and gas and bloating and stuff like that. But the gut is responsible for so much more. Like your immunity, like there's a single cell layer between your gut lining and your bloodstream. So if your gut is messed up or you have leaky gut or damage to that epithelial cell layer or the little microvilli, these little hair-like projections in your small intestine, if those are damaged, all of that stuff can cause some pretty intense inflammation and your body to produce a lot of antigens in the bloodstream against all the food particles that cross that single cell layer and wind up in your bloodstream. The other thing is that when that happens, your immune system becomes hyperreactive. So you get sick, you get the sniffles, you get acne, you get skin issues, you get all of the signs and symptoms of a hyperactive immune system. And a lot of times it has nothing to do with you being around people with a cold and the flu. It has to do with the fact that your gut is absorbing your entire environment because it's leaky. The other thing is that your gut is responsible for producing neurotransmitters, dopamine. Yeah, like a lot of these feel-good chemicals. So if your gut is broken, there's a pretty good link between that and like depression, brain fog, irritability, moodiness, lack of awareness. I have a nephew who's got some pretty serious gut issues, and he just like goes to la la land if he has gluten. Like you just see that he just like wanders around and he's like a zombie. And the reason for that is like his gut is so messed up that neurotransmitter production gets completely shut down. So the deal with the gut and how to avoid a lot of those issues is, first of all, most people have gone through a time in their lives, whether it's college or whether it's something like not being raised on breast milk, but being raised on soy formula instead, or a period of time of stress in your life that produced like ulcers and lack of gut function. A lot of people have gone through a time in their lives that has messed up their guts, and they need to get their gut repaired or restore bacterial balance in their gut from something as simple as having been on an antibiotic protocol. So there are tests that you can do to find out exactly what's going on in your gut. Like there's a company called Direct Labs, and if you order what's called a GI effects panel from them, they'll just send it to your house, and it's an unpleasant test. It's like this stool test. and you poop in this container and you put it in tubes and you mail it back off via the prepaid FedEx label that comes with the gut test. But what you find out is really interesting. Like you can find out what kind of bacteria, like if you have parasites, and crazy thing is a lot of people do, which is just nuts. And these are like parasites that do things like keep you awake at night and inhibit your ability to absorb nutrients and lots of crazy stuff. You might have H. pylori, which affects your stomach's ability to produce hydrochloric acid, which means you can't break down proteins, which means you can't build muscle. Lots of issues going on. So generally, kind of like a baseline gut fixing protocol is you knock out bad bacteria. And I like herbs for that. Like one of the best herbs is oil of oregano. That's a really good way to get rid of bad bacteria in the gut. And you can just use like an oil of oregano liquid a few times a day. You just do that for like 30 days. It's like a gut cleansing protocol. And then you heal your gut by doing things like eating fermented foods like kefir and kombucha and sauerkraut and kimchi and like a lot of these traditional like ancestrally prepared foods that have been fermented. Like you expose your gut to a wide variety of bacteria. And that's much more important than just like eating the same brand of yogurt every day, to just like present your gut with a bunch of different bacteria from a lot of different sources so that the microbial diversity in your gut gets really strong. It's the same reason why kids who like grow up on farms in large families, have pets, etc., they have stronger immune systems because they get exposed to a lot of microbial diversity. And you can do the same thing for yourself by just exposing yourself to a lot of different varieties of fermented foods. And, even if you want to use probiotics, you can use probiotics, but use like different strains, switch brands every now and again. Just expose your gut to a lot of diversity from a microbial standpoint. And then a couple of other things that you can do. If you weren't breastfed, I know this sounds weird, but if you weren't breastfed and you were raised on formula, you can call your mom and ask her, but it means that you didn't get exposed to colostrum, which is like the most important thing for closing up your gut lining when you're a kid. And if that's happened, then you can take a colostrum supplement. Like you can actually buy colostrum, same thing that's in like mammalian breast milk, and it can help to seal up the lining of your gut. A lot of the folks who I coach for like Ironman triathlon or for races in the heat, I have them load with colostrum for 2 weeks beforehand because it seals up the lining of your gut and makes your gut less permeable to the damage that can happen when you exercise in hot weather. So if you get like stomach upset during a marathon or something like that, this can really help with that. As far as other things you can do for your gut, it really depends on what happens to be wrong. But, some people have like digestive enzyme insufficiencies, so it can help to use like digestive enzymes before protein-rich meals. That can help out with gut health. God, the sky's the limit. Like I could talk about gut for hours, but those are some of the things to bear in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, gut health is so important, yet something that we all neglect to take care of when we think about our health in general. Now, then the next area that I want to touch on is mental performance. So we've all seen the movie Limitless and got really excited about that pill that turns you into Elon Musk.
Yeah. And now there's that new one, Lucy, where she like the movie is based on the flawed hypothesis that you only use 10% of your brain. And so she gets like, I haven't seen the movie yet, but I guess, she gets drugs put in her stomach and they somehow leak, and the drugs going into her bloodstream allow her to tap into like 100% of her brain power, which is scary. Scarlett Johansson using 100% of her brain power.
Yeah.
But the actual fact is that it's not that you only use 10% of your brain. It's that you only tap into 10% of your brain for any given time. So your brain is constantly switching modes from like one part of your brain to another part of your brain, depending on whether you're reading music or reading literature or solving a math problem or talking to your friend at a party. So you definitely do use all your brain. Don't worry, there's not a bunch of like wasted space up there. But you can definitely speed up neural communication, and you can shut down brain inflammation. And I already hinted at brain inflammation when I was talking about that whole like leaky blood-brain barrier thing. So brain inflammation, that'd definitely be an active omission, really, making sure that you clean up your environment. So one of the things that's most damaging to neuronal cell membranes is electromagnetic fields. And that's why there's been so many studies, most of them in Europe, that have shown that like electromagnetic radiation from cell phone signals when held up to your head can cause damage to your brain and to your neuronal cells. Same thing with Wi-Fi routers. Same thing with like the signal from cell phone towers. So for example, and this is very easy. This cost me a total of about, I would say, $30 to rig up my office like this. But I've got an Ethernet cable attached to my Wi-Fi router, and then I turn the signal to the Wi-Fi router off. So I'm hardwired into my router right now while we're talking. And then I've got this little like $3.99 grounding cable that I got from lessemf.com that plugs my laptop into the wall and it keeps my laptop grounded. Basically, it keeps my laptop from producing these electrical power surges while I'm working, which also limits exposure to EMF. There's also this idea that your cells operate at peak efficiency, including your neural cells, at about 70 millivolts. And what happens is that computers, Wi-Fi routers, cell phone signals, et cetera, those emit positive ions, which drop that electrochemical gradient. So 70 millivolts might drop to 30 or 40 millivolts. And the thing that reverses that restores that electrochemical gradient, is the exposure to what are called negative ions. Fresh air, mountain air, like water, like sea air and stuff like that, all that produces negative ions. So, I mean, one of the best things you can do after a day of working around electronic equipment is just like get outside, preferably in your bare feet, in the fresh air, next to the ocean or some kind of body of water is even better. But while you're in your office, like you can buy what's called a negative ion generator. You can get these again off Amazon for like 20, 25 bucks. You can plug it into the wall and it just spits out negative ions that counteract the effect of a lot of these positive ions that are produced by electrical equipment. So basically, the idea here is that you want to hack your work environment so that you're not presenting your brain with inflammation while you are working. And that's more important than like taking smart drugs and, modafinil and all these limitless pills. It's like most people just need to clean up their environment and get rid of the stuff that causes brain fog. Another one we talked about was like your gut. Gluten is one of the biggest things. Specifically, it's really not gluten, but it's concentrated sources of gluten. One of the most concentrated sources of gluten that exists is wheat. For example, in America, and honestly, a lot of other places now are genetically modifying wheat, but wheat is now bred for high yield crop. And that concentrates the wheat germ agglutinin, what's called the WGA in the wheat. So if you go to the grocery store and you buy whole grain bread, you're getting these micro doses of super concentrated wheat germ agglutinin, and that can cause neural inflammation. So gluten actually causes what are called the glial cells in your brain to become overactive. And they're like these, I heard a brain researcher describe it to me once as these tiny little chihuahuas walking around with machine guns. And all of a sudden they all start firing off their machine guns and going crazy and yapping all at the same time when your glial cells get exposed to inflammation. So being really careful with like gluten and bread and inflammatory triggers like that can be really important for brain health. And again, I'm talking about the stuff that goes above and beyond smart drugs because frankly, I think most people overdo that stuff these days. Like all these people like ordering smart drugs off the internet. And, again, this would be like a whole different podcast, but I personally have done a lot of hacking with smart drugs. I've tried out just about every stack that's out there. And I can tell you this stuff I'm talking about right now is more important than that because it's about your long-term health and longevity. Like it doesn't make sense to pour water on the fire on one end and gasoline on the other end. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of your brain health first. So you shut down brain inflammation, you limit EMF, and then you increase your brain plasticity and neural activation by engaging in a lot of the stuff that I opened up with in that quote. Like you're constantly learning. One of the things that I'm doing now, like my new thing is I've got a special guitar app on my iPhone that every day I sit down and it's like Guitar Hero for your iPhone. So I can pick up my acoustic guitar and it gives me a lesson and then it plays basically a Guitar Hero like screen where I got to follow the notes of the chord or the scale that I've just learned and do it at a rapid pace. And so my brain's just like jumping all over the place as I'm playing this music, but that's a new activity for me compared to like writing or podcasting or doing something else during the day that is not a new activity for my brain. So, I'm a big fan of music. I'm a big fan of learning new things. Like my kids and I do a breakdance DVD. Dancing is another great one. Music, a new sport. Like I play tennis twice a week just so I'm working on my eye tracking, on my strategy while I'm actually moving. The combination of exercise and fine motor skills amps up something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So if you can figure out ways to challenge your brain while you're exercising, like do more than just running, and that doesn't mean you have to like juggle tennis balls or whatever while you're out on a run, but
So solve math problems while you're running. What's going on here?
well, that is something you can do. Like you can, for example, like in some Spartan races, like they'll have you memorize stuff and then you do the race and you come back and you got to like spit out what you memorized. but figuring out either some kind of a sport that neurally challenges you or figuring out a way to hack your exercise so that you're neurally challenged. So there's two ways that I do that. The first is I go out of my way to do something like tennis, something that goes above and beyond just like exercising, but like tennis is a strategy sport, right? Something that makes you think. And then the other thing that I do is I meditate while I'm exercising. And the way that I do that is I do deep nasal rhythmic breathing while I'm actually out exercising. And this is something else I talk about in the book, how to kind of learn how to do this. But essentially, you're breathing through your nose. You're not allowing yourself to breathe through your mouth. And you're breathing in. Let's say you're in the weight room. It's like a 4 count in and a 4 count out as you're doing every set. And so you're focusing your mind. Like you're not allowing your mind to wander and you're not allowing your breath to wander. And something as simple as that can enhance brain activation while you're exercising. So, there are certainly neurotropics and nutrients and smart drugs and stuff that you could take, but those are some of the things that can help that just go way above and beyond just like popping pills.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you took that route versus saying like, oh, there's this pill and I make it too, and it'll solve all your problems, make you stronger, faster, everything.
Yeah, and some of that stuff is amazing, but I mean, it's overrated.
Is it kind of just short-lived? Like it doesn't really last as long as you need it to? What's it like?
You build up tolerance, and then it's so easy to use this stuff as a crutch, right? It's like cleansing supplements for alcohol. If you know that silymarin or milk thistle extract is going to help to detox your liver after a bender, then you might be more likely, if you've got a fridge full of that stuff, to go drink every weekend because you're just like, oh, I can wake up Monday morning and just like, pop 1,000 milligrams of milk thistle extract and I'm going to be fine. But really, that's not the case. I mean, you're just like, you're doing a bunch of damage and then you're fighting off some of the damage. But ultimately, it's best to figure out ways to just make yourself healthier or avoid doing the damage in the first place.
Right. And most importantly, Ben, I mean, just to get really serious now, I mean, what are the biggest lessons you've learned with the breakdance DVD that you do with your children?
Man, the biggest thing is when you're learning to dance, you got to do it like nobody's watching. Because I've tried to like watch those DVDs and try and step in a really systematic way, like they're demonstrating on the DVD, versus just like letting it go and trying to approximate what they're doing. And you always do better when you just like kind of tap into more of the like the right side, non-analytical side of your brain when you're doing stuff like dancing and stepping.
Man, so I'm looking forward to a video on YouTube, Ben. I want to see that coming out. You and your kids just rocking it hard. All right, and the next thing that I want to talk about is I know I've seen a number of articles coming out from you about the food pyramid. So what's wrong with the food pyramid and how can we kind of improve this food pyramid?
Well, it's all based off of government subsidy of corn and grain, meaning that food pyramid was developed by the USDA based off of the fact that they want to support farmers and corn and grain consumption, and that's why carbohydrates are at the bottom of the food pyramid. Kind of that combined with the fact that when the food pyramid was created, there were people like Ansel Keys influencing governmental decisions. And Ansel Keys is the guy who did this study where he took a bunch of countries and studied which ones had heart disease. And then he took the countries that had both heart disease and high levels of fat consumption and just like clustered those to basically say fat intake causes cardiovascular disease. And since then, there have been many, many, many studies that have disproven the fact that everything from fat to saturated fat consumption causes cardiovascular disease, but it's been ignored or underplayed, especially by the US government because of basically farmer lobbyists. The other issue is that in many cases, fat deficits will do things like lower your ability to fight inflammation, decrease the ability of like your myelin sheaths to form, which are really important for neural transmissions, decrease steroid and hormone precursors for testosterone and vitamin D and things of that nature. And there's one study that shows that when your cholesterol levels drop below 200, when your total cholesterol levels drop below 200, your IQ starts to drop. So there are a bunch of really beneficial aspects to healthy high fat intake and cholesterol intake. But if you follow the food pyramid, you're never going to tap into those because fat is at the top of the food pyramid. That's one thing I have on my website. It's called the Superhuman Food Pyramid, and it's a food pyramid with fat at the base of the food pyramid from olive oil and raw seeds and nuts and avocados and avocado oil and olives and wild caught fish and fish oil and all of this stuff that's fantastic for your hormones and your steroids and your brain. And then carbohydrates, particularly like grain, sugar, processed food, stuff like that, what are called acellular carbohydrates, meaning like carbohydrates that have very, very low cellular density or that aren't alive. Those are at the top of the food pyramid. Like those are the ones you want to avoid because they can cause rapid fluctuations in blood sugar. They can cause oxidation of cholesterol, and those can actually cause heart disease. And then kind of in the middle of the pyramid are like the cellular carbohydrates, meaning carbohydrates that are like alive, plant-based starches, tubers, kale, fruits, all the stuff that is healthy in terms of carbohydrate intake. And then kind of in the middle of the food pyramid is protein, but in moderate amounts. Like I used to be a total like high protein, low fat, low carb guy when I was bodybuilding. And that's very difficult on your kidney, on your liver, most people have one. And you also feel like you're just like crapping out a straw when you eat too much protein. It's just and high levels of protein also kind of don't allow you to tap into the anti-aging and longevity effects of moderated protein intake. I eat the equivalent of about 0.7 grams per pound of protein. That's about a pretty good level for an athlete or for someone who's trying to maintain or build muscle to eat. It's much less than what you'll see recommended in a lot of bodybuilding or fitness magazines, but it's healthier. And then for people who just want to maintain or maybe even not build muscle, anywhere from about 0.5 to 0.7 grams per pound of protein, if you're going to count, is about how much protein you go for. So ultimately, it's a high fat, moderate protein, low carb pyramid that's ideal. And my personal diet right now is about 50 to 60% fat intake, about 20 to 30% protein intake. And then depending on how much activity I have on any given day, with the lower amount happening on the lower activity days, 10 to 30% carbohydrate intake.
All right, and the food pyramid debunked. All right, and Ben, let's now jump into the knowledge round. So are you ready?
Let's do it, dude.
Do you ever have so many books to read that you end up not reading at all? You have so many books in your library, on your list of books that you want to read, but you don't know which books to tackle first? I know in all of my episodes, I ask guests, what are your favorite books? What are your most influential books? And they always list 3 or 4. And I always ask guests for their favorite success quote. I find that quotes can be so powerful sometimes, yet there's so many available. So what I've done is I put together a list of the top 30 books and top 30 success quotes that I think every man must live by. And these are directly from guests on the Knowledge for Men podcast. And as you know, some of the guests on my show sold their companies for millions of dollars. They're running billion-dollar organizations. They're dating coaches. They're health coaches. They're entrepreneurs. They're celebrities on TV. They're mixed martial artists. Just this wide variety of great minds. And I put together a list of the top 30 books and top 30 success quotes that every man must live by. You can download this guide for free at kfmfree.com. Again, that's kfmfree.com. All right, and Ben, how would you explain being superhuman to a newcomer?
Complete optimization of your performance, fat loss, recovery, digestion, brain, sleep, and hormone balance.
All right. And what advice would you give to someone who's feeling kind of lost or unsure of what they should do with their life?
Remember back to what made you really happy when you were about 8 years old or so, somewhere between like 5 and 10 years old. Ask your mom if you don't remember, or your parents, and try and do something that's very, very close to that. When I was at that age, even though I was a geek, I love to read, I love to write, and I was like the neighborhood kid who liked to teach stuff to the other kids. And that's what I do now, is I read, I write, and I teach.
I like that. And Ben, what was holding you back from becoming the man you are now today?
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. Because it kind of depends on like the definition of man. I recently had somebody on my podcast who runs the Art of Manliness website, and he talks about how there's 3 P's to becoming a man or to being a man. It's protecting, providing, and procreating. And like a lot of Western, red-blooded American male boys for, from the time I was in high school up until the time, I was about halfway through college, a big part of my P's was imbalance, right? Like I was focused on procreation, impressing the opposite sex, or having sex with the opposite sex. And the provision and protection aspect of becoming a man didn't really happen until I got married, and then to an even greater extent after I had kids. Like I would say like the biggest part of me for everything from a career standpoint to a personal accomplishment standpoint to like a being driven to succeed standpoint, all that happened when I had kids. It was like this trigger went off in my brain. So I know that might sound unfair to like guys who are too young to have kids or maybe don't want to have kids, but I mean like that was the biggest thing for me, honestly, was like bringing human beings into the world and realizing that I had the capability to raise two little guys who could turn out to be amazing human beings who could change the world and make it a better place. And once you get tasked with that legacy, your whole perspective on life changes.
Wow. I could see that. I mean, right when you have a kid, there's got to be this big light bulb aha moment where, oh my gosh, like this kid is mine. This kid is half me and I created this kid. Like I need to do everything I can to make this kid, have a better life than the life I had and to make sure that he becomes successful.
Yeah, it's that. I mean, frankly, like gorillas can have kids and fish can have kids, but it's like we're really the only living being on the face of the planet who can not just have kids and procreate and make new members of our population, but we've got like 18 years to teach them and to provide them with the knowledge so that they can do things like change the world, find cures for cancer, develop new technologies, figure out ways to bioremediate environmental pollution. Like there's all sorts of things that you can do. It's like you've got these little plastic human beings who are super flexible that you can plant the knowledge in them to go out and make the world a better place. And I mean, like to me, that's pretty cool.
And don't forget, you can teach them how to break dance.
And you can teach them how to break dance and fight and everything.
All right. And Ben, have you had a mentor in your life, someone who said something to you that really has stood out even till to this day? Can you share that experience?
Nope, not me. I never had a mentor. My dad was not very present when I was growing up, and I had some buddies in high school and college who I hung out with, but who I wouldn't consider mentors. And going through the early parts of my career and on even to now, I've never had a person who advises me. Maybe it's because I was homeschooled and I grew up as like this free thinker who wanted to make my own decisions and wasn't very good at following rules and being a factory worker or whatever. And, maybe part of it's pride from that, but I've never really had a mentor. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, but it just happens to be the way that I've come, the path that I've taken. And now, I've certainly had people who I'll get on the phone with and talk with and learn things from, but there's not one single person that was like my Yoda or anything like that. I wish there was, honestly, because I probably would have made a lot fewer mistakes on the path that I've taken so far. But no, I never really had a mentor.
Well, how about from books? Do you have 2 or 3 books that you've read that maybe have stood out to you on your journey to help you in your own development?
Yeah, I would say some of the better books is there's one by Charlie Munger called The Poor Man's Almanac. And Charlie Munger is like Warren Buffett's sidekick. And he's got this book of knowledge that's just amazing. It's called The Poor Man's Almanac. That one's really good as far as like being able to tap into the illogical decisions that human beings make and how to play on those, how to identify them in yourself and how to learn from them. So that one's really good. What are a couple of other books that I really like? I like a series of learnings from a guy named Brian Johnson called The Philosopher's Notes. It's 100 different 20 to 30 minute MP3 downloads that you can grab. His website is Entheos, but if you just Google Philosopher's Notes, you should be able to find him. It's like $20-$30. I think you just pay what you want to pay. But that's really good as far as like an introduction to philosophy and the way that a lot of the great thinkers have kind of thought through history. And it's a really good way to get some very, very good perspectives on life. And it comes in both audio and PDF. And then I read a lot of different blogs. I would have to say some of the more influential blogs that I read that kind of influence me and that I would consider to be kind of like mentor-esque type of blogs. I read Seth Godin's blog. I read James Altucher's blog, and I'm just scrolling through my list here for maybe one more that I get quite a bit out of. Seth Godin, James Altucher. Another guy who, like in the fitness world, who has kind of influenced me from a financial standpoint is Ryan Lee. Ryan Lee is like kind of like the godfather of fitness business, and he's one guy that I've looked to and kind of followed in terms of like the way he runs his businesses and stuff. So that'd be another one that I follow for those of you who are into fitness out there. But hopefully that gives you a few things to run with.
Yeah, really good stuff there. I'll check some of that stuff out. And scenario here for you, Ben. Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
I would tell him to approach every day with the concept that there is affluence of time, meaning that when you wake up in the morning, you don't jump out of bed checking Facebook and email and everything, but you just lay there soaking up the sunlight, breathing. I do journaling. I do some meditation, close my eyes. And when you start a day slow like that, the whole day goes far better and you just feel more patient, like you have more time for everything. So I would approach every day with the affluence of time. There's always going to be enough time. There's always going to be enough time to do what you want to do. And you don't have to do everything. You don't have to have everything. But when you wake up, set that intention that there is enough time to accomplish what you want to accomplish for that day, and just approach the day with that affluence of time. That's what I would do. As far as what I would not do, one big mistake that I made being in the field that I'm in is thinking that exercise was the best way to make your body better. And really, exercise is just the icing on the cake. I spend every day standing at a standing workstation. I got a heavy sandbag out in the garage that I go and lift a few times a day. I've got a pull-up bar in the door of my office that I'll crank out a few pull-ups on every time I walk underneath it. I'll do 100 jumping jacks for every hour that I'm sitting down if I do sit. By the end of the day, I've been engaged in like this hunter-gatherer, farmer-esque type of low-level physical activity, and exercise is optional. And I used to think that exercise was non-optional and that it was just a way to reverse the effects of sitting for 8 hours a day. But now I simply approach every day trying to think about how I can hack my environment to be as physically active as possible. And exercise becomes much less of a chore and just like this optional thing you can do to inject a little bit of fitness into the end of the day. And that's been amazing for me as far as allowing me to just stay lean and fit and not have to worry so much about the standard trip to the gym.
I interviewed a guy named Paul Jaminet from the Perfect Health Diet, and he said something that really stood out to me, and he's just said, live your life like a caveman. Live your life like a caveman does. And that kind of stood with me.
Yeah. And to a certain extent, I think the cavemen did die early and get killed by saber-toothed tigers, and probably didn't have a great quality of life. And I probably shaved more than a caveman does. But yeah, to a certain extent, yeah.
All right. And now just kind of reflecting back on your past here, growing up playing World of Warcraft to biomechanics, collegiate sports, bodybuilding, triathlons, Ironman competitions, and now you even have this great community where you've impacted millions of lives, best-selling author. What would you say is your philosophy on life and success?
Happiness comes down to doing what you have a passion for, being surrounded by loving relationships, and living for a greater purpose that is outside yourself. If you can check off those three things, do your passion, have a lot of friends and love and family in your life, and then also have something you're living for that goes way above and beyond just like making money and driving a nice car, but maybe changing the world, changing people's lives, some type of legacy that you're living for. And that can include like what I was talking about. Your greater purpose is making cool kids. Those are three things that you should definitely include as staples in your life.
All right. I love it. And Ben, what are you working on now? Like what's next for Ben Greenfield here?
What I'm working on right now is a book, and it's specifically a book proposal. And I wrote a book recently. It's on Amazon as a Kindle download. It's called How to Grow Tiny Superhumans. And it's about all the little things that you can do to enhance your children's intelligence, their beauty, their motivation, their drive, their physical fitness, their health, to basically give them a big step up in life. But it's like a 40-page little Kindle, and I want to take that and develop it into a much more comprehensive manual on how to make superhuman kids. So I'm working on that right now, and so that's kind of the next major project for me, in addition to pursuing my goal of being one of the top-ranked Spartan athletes on the face of the planet. And then bengreenfieldfitness.com is where I blog and podcast. And that's just a place to get lots of free information related to a lot of the stuff I was talking about. And then anytime I find anything that's a cool biohack, something I would recommend, supplement, gear, tool, book, anything, I put it over at a website at greenfieldfitnesssystems.com.
All right, Ben, thank you so much for your time, sharing your story and life lessons with my community here, and all the interesting, health and life hacks that you've given us here today. I'll be sure to put those into play. All right, Ben, until next time.
Sweet. Thanks for having me on.